Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Mama don't allow no architecture around here. Oh, I don't care what Mama don't allow, gonna draw mine modern anyhow. Mama don't allow no architecture around here.
Hi, I'm Tom Guild. Welcome to US Modernist Radio, where we talk and laugh with people who enjoy, own, create, dream about, preserve, love, and hate modernist architecture, the most exciting and controversial buildings in the world. Nowhere in the world celebrates modernism better than Palm Springs, California. Every February, they have a huge architecture and design festival called Modernism Week, a dazzling 10-day spectacle of architecture, martinis, lectures, art, architecture movies, parties, tours, exhibits, and George Smart's favorite late-night treat, the 24-hour $3.40 breakfast slam at Denny's. George was at Modernism Week this year talking poolside with keynote speakers, authors, and special guests. It's a tough job, but somebody had to do it. On this episode of US Modernist Radio, George welcomes Gregory Ain filmmakers Christiane Robbins and Catherine Lambert. And later on, Jennifer Dunlop Fletcher, Helen Hilton Razor curator at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art's Department of Architecture and Design. Support for US Modernist Radio comes from Realtor Angela Roll, your highly trained special agent bringing modernist design expertise to buyers and sellers. Reach Angela at angelaroll.com, that's ROEHL, or call her at 919-995-0550. So let's go to Palm Springs and Modernism Week.
This is George Smart with US Modernist Radio, coming to you poolside from the Hotel Skylark in Palm Springs, California, during Modernism Week. That spectacle of a week, it's actually 10 days, where you can come out here and sip martinis and go on tours and attend lectures, watch movies, eat great food, and talk with people like my guests, Christiane Robbins and Catherine Lambert. We're going to be talking today about an architect you may have never heard of, but the FBI definitely has heard of. Gregory Ain is called the most dangerous architect in America because he was doing things that now would be considered pretty normal, like wanting to have equal housing for people around the country and in Los Angeles. But at the time, he was considered very suspect. The FBI maintained extensive record on him and his family. You might recall a few months ago, we talked with his daughter Emily about FBI surveillance of her house and some of the files, and I believe there was a babysitter involved. We'll talk about the babysitter today. So,
the nanny.
The secret nanny. So, welcome, Christiane and Catherine.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, George.
So, let's get right to it. What was really the most dangerous thing about this architect? Because I don't think of architects as being particularly dangerous.
He had ideas.
He had ideas.
That were a little bit different.
What were they?
He had ideas about bringing people together, interracial communities. He had ideas about gender and gender equality, bringing the family together in terms of roles, the wife being brought into the family through sliding walls, open kitchens, which we now take as standard fare. But that was a huge leap in terms of how space affects gender and family and the roles that we operate within the domestic scene, you know.
And he had ideas around sustainable living, green belts, smaller communities of people living together, and living in smaller, more compact colonies. So a lot of his ideas were very prescient at the time. Today, we would think, why didn't we do this? Why didn't we go down that route? But at that particular time, they were pretty radical.
And, you know, they were prescient, and we take them for granted, I think, in so many ways, especially here in California, that we have the open kitchen, as I mentioned, or we have...
Well, let's start with that for a second, because I don't quite get, why was open kitchen so controversial?
Well, if you think about it, the kitchen was walled off, literally, from the rest of the living room and the dining room. Relative to space, and this is my own interpretation, it could be looked at as a servant's quarters. So there's an inherent dismissal of the role of the wife in that she's sequestered in the kitchen, making all the meals and feeding everyone, but then they come out and then she comes out into the dining room and serves everyone. When you have an open kitchen, it makes it, to my mind, much more equal. Like you're part of the family. This is part of what we do. Anybody is there. I can watch the kids. Anybody can watch the kids from the kitchen, or maybe I'm wrong here, Catherine.
No,
but
you're absolutely right. There was changing roles in society, and he really developed the kitchen open concept that we now love and is featured in pretty much all of our architecture of today. But there was a servantless society that was evolving around the 30s and 40s, and he actually developed these ideas and concepts around space and flexible living, families growing, and kids can leave, and then the house can be reconfigured. These are all really radical ideas, but they were very modernist.
Well, I get that, but I guess what I don't see is what was so threatening about the open kitchen. I mean, this is escalating all the way up to the FBI.
Well, no, I mean, I was just saying that was one of his early iterations of the open kitchen. But the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration, used that as a reason to deny funding for some of his projects, most notably community homes. They thought it was too risque. It was just something that people wouldn't be interested in, and they wouldn't offer financing for it.
So they wanted to keep the women holed up in the little kitchens, separated off from the rest of the family. One
would think.
Let's talk about community housing. That was his big public project that got a lot of notoriety for a variety of reasons, one of which was it was going to be open to anybody, which was very different for the time.
Indeed it was.
Community homes was a project that Gregory Ain worked on for many years, and there were subscribers to the project, of which approximately 15% of them were from different races and nationalities. And originally the project was approved by the city of Los Angeles. However, apparently there were informants who were attending meetings, and they felt that it was their opinion, these informants, that you must have had to have been a communist to be a part of this community. Once the FHA got wind of this 15% of people it was going to be interracial, they basically cut off the financing. And therefore, the group of people were not willing to disband. They weren't willing to kick these people out of the group, and so therefore the entire project essentially was sidelined.
They fought this for a very long time because they felt that, it was clearly racist because the FHA had given them a preliminary approval for funding. And then they rescinded it upon becoming aware that they had a 15% interracial mix of blacks, of Hispanics, of Asians, and those of Jewish extraction. And it was amazing. We now look at this with just going, oh my God, how could this even be? But it was. And, in our generation, we just can't even fathom that.
And there were prominent people who were part of that group, including actress Lena Horne, who later Ain built a house for after community homes folded. But community homes was a really pivotal project in our research in terms of its relationship to the exhibition house in 1950 that was commissioned by Philip Johnson
at MoMA, and its relationship to these prescient ideas that he had, that many of them came together within this project called Community Homes.
Community Homes, was that the action that really triggered the FBI's monitoring?
No. Actually, he was monitored many years prior
Before
to
that.
Many years, yes.
And this lasted how long?
A period of over 20 years of his life.
How did this all come to light that they had been poking around about him and following him?
Well, I think, we were doing research for the film, and we were meeting with a lot of people, and certainly the original residents at Avenel, who were, in their 90s, but they were wonderfully lucid and chatty and delightful. And I would talk to them, and Catherine would talk to them, and you would get to this point of talking about, let's say, the politics of the time, or how they all came together, and the gauntlet would be thrown down. They would not talk about it. And say, we'll talk about that later. And that just did not ever happen. We also were talking to Emily Ain. And Emily Ain would not discuss any of this. In fact, she feigned that she didn't know anything about any of this. In fact, I was very surprised when we sat down that you talked to her and you talked to her about the FBI files, because she never even admitted to us that any of this took place. So I think there was such a scarring of what happened that it's taken this long for people to be able to kind of reconcile and negotiate this with themselves as to what actually happened and how they make sense of it to this day. So it piqued my interest as to what was going on, and I made a request, submitted a request to the FBI in 2008, because I knew from one of the stories of the residents, Maury Markoff, and who was also in his 90s. He was an original resident, but he moved in shortly thereafter, and he had said something to me about the FBI hounding the people that lived in Avenel. So it piqued my interest, and I said, all right, if they hounded them, they must have been watching them. They must have known and suspected that they were, communists or whatever was the rumors that were going around. So I put in a requisition for this FOIA file.
Freedom of Information Act.
Freedom of Information Act in 2008, and it wasn't available. Yet. So I had to wait, and I waited, and then I got distracted with other projects that I was working on and returned and made another request. Was it 2013 or 14? And then it took 2 years to get those. And I got them in February 2016.
So this leads us to the nanny.
Yes.
Tell us about the nanny.
Well, the nanny and her husband. Her husband, from my reading of the FBI file, had recommended to the nanny that she go to the FBI and offer her services to be an informant and to survey in a very covert fashion Gregory Ain, Ruth March, Emily, and Christopher Ain and their friends as they came in and out of the house, their whereabouts, where they were going, what was left in the house, everything. You can imagine the ultimate betrayal of that is. And she did that, and she went to the FBI and she served in that role.
She also offered to let them into their home when they were not there.
What was she and the FBI afraid of? I mean, what was going to happen if they were left unchecked?
I don't think they had a specific goal or vision of what that might be. I think it was just this general need for control and surveillance to make sure that they would not be enacting any kind of activities that the FBI considered to be subversive at that point.
And what year was this approximately?
That was in 47?
47.
I don't know for sure. It was 46,
but
47.
Late 40s. Late 40s.
46, 47, yeah.
Late 40s, post-war. So did this change any when the Civil Rights Act came in place in the 60s? Did the FBI go away at that point because it was a non-issue?
Well, Gregory joined the Progressive Party in 1948, I think, 47 or 48. And then he also became a member of the Civil Rights Congress, as did many members of the Community Homes Project and many of his friends who had been friends all of his life, like Bob and Dorothy Kahan. And we have a card from Dorothy Kahan, I think in the early 50s, that she had signed Gregory in to the Civil Rights Congress. So these people were fighting for these rights all through the 40s and 50s.
Civil rights.
Civil rights.
But did it change in 65 when the civil rights legislation was put in place?
So the FBI surveillance?
Yes.
I think they had stopped surveying him. They took him off the security index card in the mid-50s, and everything kind of came to a conclusion in the early 60s. So that's as far as we know.
The earlier surveillance, which was of interest to you, I'm sure, will be that he was being watched while he worked for the Evans Plywood Company with Charles and Ray Eames. So there were informants within the Eames office, and they were watching the Evans Plywood Company because of its government contracts, and this was when they were developing the famous plywood splints for the war effort. And they were concerned about whether or not there were trade secrets about making plywood, which I think would be sort of scary. Anyway,
did the Russians need our plywood secrets?
They probably did, because God, who knows how to make plywood?
Who knows how to mold plywood? But this was particularly of interest. They watched and monitored his activities throughout the day, his phone calls, who he was working with. And as they also noted, mostly all of the 15 people that worked there kind of shared similar views politically.
Tell us a little bit about your film.
Well, the film is being revived. We had done basically a reversal of a film production process because we became aware of what was going on. And we also were aware of the advanced age of many of these people that we needed to interview. And I'll give an example of Julius Shulman, is that we interviewed him 4 times before he passed away. And we were grateful to get that footage, that amount of footage. And he was the one who encouraged us to pursue the film on Gregory Ain. And with Carl and Dorothy Brandt, the same thing. We were able to interview them. We were able to interview a number of people who were of advanced age, and we've gotten all of that. And then I couldn't receive any funding for the film because, quite honestly, I think people did not want to fund a film about an architect who was branded as a communist, when in fact, I don't really think that he was. In terms of the kind of bad communist meaning
right.
of communist. I don't think that was it at all. In fact, I think he was a very conflicted person. I think he was a very private person. He liked finer things in life, that he drove a Packard. He was very involved in nightlife. I mean, he wasn't your stereotypic red diaper kind of person at all.
Well, if you go back in the histories of that, most of the people were not that way. They were just wanting civil liberties and equal rights in a very way we think of as average now.
Yeah,
exactly. And that was what was so unfortunate, that he was branded again in 2008 or something as this communist or a socialist. And, we just project all over those meanings and those definitions. And I don't think that it gave an accurate portrayal of who this guy was at all and what his practice was about. Because his practice was about equality, and it was about equal rights, and it was about mixing working class, middle class, professional classes together. And that was the richness of it. And I don't think that him as this purveyor of low-cost housing really does him justice in terms of...
Well, how can people see the film?
Oh, well...
Yeah, back to the film.
Back to the film. We are going into post-production. We're looking for funding to finish it, and it's being sponsored by Women Make Movies out of New York. They're very much behind it. We have that. We also have a television series we're doing. And so if anybody's interested in coming on as an executive producer, we would welcome that.
Well, thank you very much for dropping by and talking with me.
Thank you.
And best of luck to you on this project.
Thank
yes.
you. Stick around. There's more to come from George and Jennifer Dunlop Fletcher at Modernism Week.
This is George Smart with the US Modernist Radio here poolside in Palm Springs, California at Modernism Week at the Hotel Skylark. And my guest today is Jennifer Dunlop Fletcher, who is originally from North Carolina, I just found out, and went to a junior high school and a high school that I'm familiar with. And her parents taught at NC State University, and I'm sure we could unfold other kinds of things as we go along. She holds a basket full of degrees. Art history from New York University, curatorial studies of contemporary art from Bard College, and architecture history and theory from Harvard University, a small school in the Northeast you've probably never heard of. She is now the Helen Hilton Reiser Curator of Architecture Design at the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art. Wow, that is a mouthful.
It is.
She is here speaking during Modernism Week, and I am lucky to catch her on her way out of town. Welcome, Jennifer.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Tell us about your talk during Modernism Week.
Oh, it was really fun. My colleague and I, Joseph Becker and I, are co-curating an exhibition on the Sea Ranch, which opens at SFMOMA in December. And we had the opportunity to speak a little bit about what we're thinking about the Sea Ranch and how we're going to position the exhibition. And one of the living designers, Barbara Stoffaker-Solomon, we convinced her to come with us, and we got to interview her also on stage and have a conversation.
Sea Ranch is not those monkeys I could buy in the back of comic books that you add water. They were really brine shrimp. Sea Ranch is actual place that is pretty fascinating. Tell us about that.
It is. It's 100 miles north of San Francisco. It is a 10-mile-long stretch along Highway 1 that is 1 mile wide and stretches from the rugged coastline through a meadow and up through the forest. And it is a planned town and community from 1965 that was really going to be a unique living model for being able to live within the environment in architectural excellence.
Wow, that sounds pretty utopian.
It does.
How did it work out?
Well, the first phase, let's call it, worked
Phase
out.
one, yes.
Phase one worked out beautifully. And there are excellent examples from Joseph Esherick, MLTW, or Moore, Linden, Turnbull, Whitaker, and more examples by William Turnbull. Beautiful homes, and all small scale, 600 to 1,000 square feet. That was the intention then of being efficient with space.
Small footprint living.
Small footprint living, views of the ocean, really having 50% common space. And at one point, the Coastal Commission came along and said, wait a minute, you can't have a private development along the coast without public access. Even though they had built the houses around a kind of semicircle off the coast line, exactly, really to be more centered around a meadow. And the meadow, one could walk through it, but it was not a designated public access area. And so for 10 years, the development went into a development moratorium and could not develop phase 2, phase 3, the further along that stretch of land.
Because they would have been required to have public access? Was
yes.
That why?
And so they did. They had to have public access, and it works out fine now. But that 10-year moratorium on the development meant that the development kind of took over from the idealism of the architects and had to recoup financially the money that they lost by building in phases, and had to go to build within the meadows and maybe build a little larger homes than was originally intended. Because it was intended for just plain folks, from plumbers to professors, and it was intended to be a meditative community, one that enjoyed being in the rugged outdoors.
Well, this sounds a little bit like the 60s, doesn't it? I mean, we're trying to find that special place in California near the coast, like Big Sur and Esalen, and this is just kind of the northern version of that to a certain extent.
Yes, but it wasn't really like a hippie commune. It was more trying to be in the vein of modern living. What does that exemplify? What does that mean? Could modern living mean good design for all? And could good design for all mean a kind of respect for the environment and a cohabitation with the environment without mowing it over or raising it?
So did people get along okay with this? Were they cool with this living?
As far as I can tell, people love living there.
Yeah.
At the time, I also heard it sounded really ideal. I did read an interesting New York Times quote from 2005 where someone was quoted as saying, hell is running into your neighbors, but...
So there was a phase 1, and then there was a moratorium, and then there was a phase 2,
and 3 and 4 and 5.
3 and 4 and 5.
Right.
So is it fully built out now?
I can't answer that. There was enough space to have 5,000 residences.
5,000?
5,000, and everyone could have an acre, kind of equal, and that allowed 50% of that land to be common area.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the numbers are now.
So being 100 miles north of San Francisco, that puts it in wine country, basically?
But on the coast.
But on the coast side.
So it is, they say the first 2 hours are so easy, and the last hour, which is windy, is really to keep the less hardy away.
Keep the tourists out, right?
Or just the people who are not ready to embrace the shift in the environment. It could be foggy 1 minute. The sun can come out 5 minutes later. It could be extreme winds like we're having now.
Yeah.
It's just a constantly shifting environment, which was part of the appeal of the developer and the landscape architect at that time of being more attuned to an environment that is constantly shifting.
So if this was a development sort of for every man and woman, not just people who are into architecture design, for instance, how did they support it? How did they get the infrastructure in there, the power and the water and the sewer and all of that in this very remote place?
Well, I can't speak to the infrastructure specifically. It has Highway 1 running through it, and there's 2 towns, one to the north and one to the south. And originally, they
What towns were those?
Wallala
Okay.
and Stewart's Point.
Okay.
And the original intention that was that the beginning, they would have 15, 20 years of second home for the creative class, they call it. And then they would build infrastructure more like schools, a post office. They actually did have a post office. They actually do have an airstrip.
Airstrip?
Yes, mom and pop shops. The developer was very influenced by the Garden City movement and Newtown movement that was popular in Europe. And they just thought the first financial foundation would be second home, and then it would switch over to first home.
Okay. So do people visit Sea Ranch now? Is it a place that is kind of on the radar? Can you stay there if you want to?
Yes.
What's it like if you go down that twisty, windy road in the fog late at night and discover this oasis?
I think it's a very special place. You can rent there, you can buy there, you can rent architecturally significant homes that are on Airbnb. It's really special to be in this environment. I don't know how to explain it, but everyone just kind of relaxes when they're there and does long walks, and there's pools inside of berms. It's a unique place.
I wanted to ask you about something. My crack research staff poured over the internet to try to find interesting things about you. And I was fascinated by something that you mentioned in an interview back, the operations room for Project Cybersyn in Chile, which I looked up, which was kind of a decision room they used to do in the 90s.
Yeah.
It looked like they borrowed the set from Star Trek and put in the chairs.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit about this funky room in Chile that you remember.
Well, I think the question was, where have you not been that you would like to go?
Yeah.
And this is kind of looming in my imagination as being a fascinating place, although now it doesn't exist.
Gone, yes.
But because I'm also working on an exhibition about space race design, and at that time it was more government racing to be the first ones to the moon or out in space, and now it's more private. But that one was designing new technologies, and I don't know, it had a kind of beauty and a fascination and this utopian drive that I'm always fascinated by of getting out into space.
Well, you know, this room evidently was a place where people could get together and talk, and it had an armrest with different buttons in the armrest of different shapes. Mm-hmm. And each shape would represent different kind of decisions, I read. Mm-hmm. You could have a yes button and a no button, although it wasn't labeled as such. You could table decisions. You could change the ranking of things. There were screens up around you. And this was under the Allende administration, I think, in Chile.
I love it even more now.
Do you know what happened to it at all?
I don't know, unfortunately.
Okay. All right, so listeners, you're going to be Googling this now,
yes.
I know, and send this back.
I can tell you about a fascinating work that's in our collection, though, that has a similar approach by Ant Farm called Convention City. And they imagined this world or city under a bubble that would be in Texas, and you could only get to it through the underground. And once you arrive there, every citizen in that town is an actor on the stage of acting out political debates. And they would have a live debate. And from your TV, no matter where you are in the U.S., you could watch that debate being acted out and then vote from your home with your remote of, yes, I want to pass that proposition or...
Okay.
Yeah.
I like that idea until someone figures out how to hack it.
Right. Yes. Well,
which is kind of an issue.
Yes.
So you have an interest in these utopian type communities.
I do.
Have you ever been to Findhorn in Scotland?
No.
Findhorn in Scotland is a pretty interesting place. I went there a little bit over 20 years ago for a couple of weeks.
What is it?
There was a book called The Secret Life of Plants in the 70s that was very popular. and it brought about this craze in the U.S. about you buy the plant and you talk to it, and the plant's supposed to be happier and grow bigger, and you're supposed to play music to your plant and basically treat your plant like a pet. And I think this came and went over the course of a year. But it started at Findhorn, where allegedly they talked to their vegetables. They prayed with their vegetables. They communed with the vegetables. And so they would produce, grapefruit-sized tomatoes and basketball-sized other fruit because of this setup. And so people were attracted to this from all over.
Yeah.
If you haven't put that on your list.
I will.
But it's still around.
Okay.
And still going. It's got some very interesting stories.
Yes.
There were lots of these kinds of utopian communities in California, some of which wanted to do things with architecture and some of which just wanted to get a yurt and really completely go back to the land. Were there any others besides Sea Ranch that took a design kind of angle that you know of?
Well, I've been thinking a little bit about Crestwood Hills in Los Angeles, and also I want to do further research on the Salton Sea North Shore resort and residential development.
Oh, I hadn't heard of this.
Yes, also by Albert Frey and William Pereira, and it was never built, only the yacht club and resort, but the thinking then was that the resort would be the financial anchor and it would support kind of whole modern development out there.
The Salton Sea is not in a foreign country. It is in California.
Yes.
It is south of Palm Springs, and it's full of seawater. It's a high salt. You can float in it.
Well, it's runoff from Colorado River, but it's also been going through a lot of agricultural so it's not clean water necessarily.
Oh, so you don't want to float in it anymore.
It's very salinated, it's pretty toxic, and they did not do their research, these developers, in the way that they did on the Sea Ranch of the conditions of the site.
So if you want a toxic spa experience, head on down to the Salton Sea.
Yes.
I wanted to ask you about your research on Quincy Jones.
Oh.
One of my favorite architects. He seems to be a real fave now among Hollywood celebrities who have been buying up his houses and flipping them. Ellen DeGeneres, I think, has done that with one or two of his houses. Jennifer Aniston recently really played Architecture Digest into doing a spread for her and then announced the houses for sale. Have you seen that lately?
No, I have not.
Oh, yes. And then announced her separation from her husband.
Okay.
All in the same week. It seems, to me, a little orchestrated, but, who knows?
Yes, yeah.
What did you learn about Quincy Jones as you were diving into him?
Quincy Jones was interesting for me because he was so savvy about both architecture and business, and he thought a lot about kind of ideal homes, modern homes, especially that would bring in all the light. That's why you have the cantilevered roofs, and was very much an early, not just investor, but inhabitant of Crestwood Hills. And to me, I think his interest in Eichler, his partnership with Eichler, I think that got the kind of business aspect flowing. And I don't know, he just thought a little bit more about not just the utopian part, but the practicalities of being an architect and also making a livable space and community.
He had a partnership with Paul Williams?
Shortly. He actually, that was his first job.
Okay.
Working for Paul Williams.
Paul Williams. And
yes.
They collaborated on a bunch of things after that.
They did, and out here in the desert. And maybe one community in Arizona, I think.
So what's next in your area of interest? What's going to light you up for the next year or so?
Well, I'm still basking in the glow of opening a new exhibition called Design in California that is tracing the history of product design once the computer lands. That is on view until May. Then turning my attention to the Sea Ranch and then the space race design.
And how can people find out more about the San Francisco Museum of Modern Art?
Probably through the website.
Which would be?
www.sfmoma.org.
SFMOMA, that's SFMOMA.org.
Yes, and then try to type in architecture and design, and you'll see our department. Our website has gotten pretty interesting. We're adding a lot of articles there. We're doing fewer publications and posting articles more on our website. We also have just been working with our collections department to think about how to provide digital data on our collections. So you could search things like how many modernist chairs do we have? or
wow.
by women architects specifically, by
Yeah.
women architects in Chile specifically, something like that.
Oh, that's nice.
Yes.
So you can really drill down.
You can really
right?
lose yourself.
Yeah. Well, that's a
Spend some time there.
yeah. We have people that come to our website and then they email me at 3 a.m. and go, "I hate you.
Oh.
I hate you. There's so much here." Well, Jennifer, thanks so much for coming by. It's really been a pleasure to talk to you.
Likewise.
And have a safe flight.
Yes. And I will check out USModernist.org.
All right.
Thanks for listening. Want to go to Modernism Week in Palm Springs next year and hang out with the cool kids, plus George Smart and yours truly? Send us an email to george@ncmodernist.org. US Modernist Radio is underwritten by Angela Roll, your special agent for Modernist Houses, 919-995-0550. Visit usmodernist.org to listen to past shows and discover our massive mid-century modernist archives. US Modernist Radio is produced by Soundtracks Recording Studios in Raleigh, North Carolina. Our theme song is performed by George Smart and Robinson Earl. Cindy Stratton, not her real name, researches guests from a top-secret location that serves spinach pineapple smoothies. US Modernist Radio is a production of Triangle Modernist Archive, a nonprofit educational organization for the documentation, preservation, and promotion of modernist residential design. I'm Tom Guile. See you in Palm Springs.